I'm Doug Boynton, and you're listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition, highlighting the week's news and stories happening in our area. As we look into this week's program, Virginia Beach has plans to bring music to the oceanfront this spring. The Dome is hiring ahead of its grand opening in May, and a new hip-hop festival replaces Something in the Water in April. If you're a resident of Suffolk, it's a great time to be a homeowner. Property values soared more than $1 billion for the city in 2025. And the Department of Veterans Affairs has been hit hard by budget cuts. Thousands of jobs are on the chopping block, despite the large need for veterans' medical care. It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. Ever heard of a living laboratory? It tests the best strategies for using nature to fight flooding. That's what local officials want Hampton Roads to become for the federal government. WHRO climate reporter Catherine Hafner explains.
Hampton Roads faces one of the nation's highest rates of sea level rise. Justin Schaefer with the City of Norfolk says that has made it a natural testbed for climate solutions.
This area has always been a bit of a testing ground for different ideas, particularly in this environmental space.
They're now trying to formalize that concept by becoming a, quote, proving ground under a Federal Army Corps of Engineers program called Engineering with Nature. Schaefer says the goal is to become a hub of research and collaboration.
We need to make sure that what we're designing for flood resilience can work with nature.
For example, Norfolk plans to build massive storm surge barriers across local waterways. They want to learn more about how that will impact the ecosystem long term. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
A controversial military-themed brewery closed its doors in Norfolk. WHRO's Ryan Murphy tells us why.
Armed Forces Brewing CEO Alan Beal blames a, quote, local woke mob for creating a toxic environment and impacting the company's profits after it moved to Norfolk a little more than a year ago. But recent financial records show the company was struggling financially for years and continued to post substantial losses after it opened its Norfolk facility. Court records from Norfolk, Portsmouth, and beyond, dating back to October, show companies going after Armed Forces Brewing for unpaid debts. The company drew the ire of residents who say Armed Forces Brewing's marketing and statements by spokesman Robert O'Neill were misogynistic, homophobic, and transphobic. More than 800 people wrote in to oppose the city's permitting of the brewery in 2023. Beal says in the statement the company's not folding altogether and is just closing its flagship brewery and taproom in Norfolk. He wrote the company will relocate but didn't say where or when. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
Some Norfolk residents are embracing the local woke mob label after the head of that brewery blamed the woke mob for its closing. WHRO's Ryan Murphy is back with their perspective.
Beth Dreyer saw the news about Armed Forces Brewing's closing early Friday. By that afternoon, she'd made pins featuring a watchful eye surrounded by the words, Local Woke Mob Norfolk.
So many people can find humor in this and can find not like the little guys one, but in some way, like we did it. We didn't support them and so they left.
Many called the brewery's marketing and statements by its spokesman misogynistic, transphobic, and hateful. Dreyer and hundreds of others tried and failed to stop the city from permitting the brewery in 2023. Now they're taking a victory lap. Dreyer's ordering hundreds of local woke mob stickers after overwhelming interest in her pins. T-shirts popped up over the weekend, and now there's a woke mob candle courtesy of a Norfolk candle maker. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
Want to work near the beach and hear new bands every night? Virginia Beach's newest entertainment venue is hiring ahead of its grand opening in May. Here's more from WHRO's Connor Worley.
The Dome is hosting 3 job fairs at the Virginia Beach Convention Center where applicants can interview and be hired on the spot. The job fairs are scheduled for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, March 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. Available positions include security, guest services, ticket takers, operations, cleaning crew, servers, production, bartenders, and more. The Dome is part of a $300 million public-private oceanfront development featuring restaurants, a hotel, apartments, and a massive surf park. You can RSVP online to reserve your interview. Connor Worley, WHRO News.
After a tumultuous relationship with the Something in the Water organizers, we now know what will take the place of that festival at the oceanfront late next month. WHRO's Barry Graham has the story.
It'll be called Vibe Check, a free hip-hop and R&B festival that will be held at the Virginia Beach oceanfront on April 25th and 26th. Headlined by Waka Flocka Flame and Bryce Vine, it replaces the canceled Something in the Water. Organized by Beach Events, the festival aims to boost tourism and celebrate the Vibe District's 10th anniversary. Local artists and vendors will also be featured. While the event is free, tickets for premium viewing areas cost $50. Barry Graham, WHRO News.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says he wants to remove roadblocks by replacing the military's top legal officers. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh says the move could affect hard-fought reforms to military justice.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was recently asked to clarify what he was looking for after he moved to replace the top judge advocate generals for the Navy, Army, and Air Force.
I want the best possible lawyers in each service to provide the best possible recommendations no matter what lawful orders that are given. And we didn't think those particular positions were well suited. And so we're looking for the best. We're opening it up to everybody to be able to be the top lawyer of those services.
Opening the process to everyone would be difficult. After 20 years of war, Congress and the services put rules in place to stop commanders and administrations from pushing aside the JAG Corps when tough decisions are being made. Mark Nevid is a former Navy JAG based in Norfolk. He's now a professor at Emory University School of Law in Atlanta.
Sometimes a lawyer has to provide guidance, has to be actually a roadblock if someone desires to do something illegal. And so I think that Hegseth has a very different view of the JAGs that does not understand the need for independent, objective legal advice.
During the early years of the Bush administration, JAGs were either not in the room or overruled when the White House was authorizing enhanced interrogation methods like waterboarding after the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001, Nevitt says.
After the enhanced interrogation techniques, Congress passed a law basically authorizing JAGs to wear 3 stars. Prior, they were at 2-star rank. So Congress at some point recognized that you needed to have military JAGs in the room for these important discussions.
The restriction was loosened in 2016, but ultimately the Senate will have to hold hearings and vote on the final selections. Hegseth says he's looking for the best people. Over the years, he has expressed contempt for JAG officers. Here he is at his confirmation hearing, where he was asked to define what he means when he uses the slur jagoff to describe some of them.
It would be a JAG officer who puts his or her own priorities in front of the warfighters, their promotions, their medals, in front of having the backs of those who are making the tough calls on the front lines.
Hegseth served with the Minnesota Army National Guard in Iraq and as a trainer in Afghanistan. He has long expressed his frustration with a strict interpretation of the rules of engagement, basically the rules set down by commanders which say what a unit can or cannot do in the field. Rachel Van Landingham is a former Air Force JAG and a law professor at Southwestern Law School, L.A.
Judge advocates provide a legal review on that because the rules of engagement are rules that are bounded by the law. Commanders do whatever they want. And even if commanders wanted to exceed those left and right limits, lawyers provide advice. They don't order warfighters to do anything.
She has worked with the top Air Force JAG, Lieutenant General Charles Plummer, and found him to be a loyal and accomplished lawyer. Even when they clashed over the best way to change the system to handle cases of sexual assault. Those cases led Congress to give more independence to JAGs while limiting the role of commanders in certain criminal cases.
And I wish Mr. Hegseth had really taken some time to do this in a smarter way that doesn't just send this signal that it's his way or the highway and JAGs, you just better get out of the way.
Van Landingham is now concerned that some of that independence is now in jeopardy. For NPR News, I'm Steve Walsh.
Still ahead on Weekly Edition, Veterans Affairs staff fear that a policy ending diversity programs will restrict care for LGBTQ+ veterans. But first, now over to Suffolk, where the housing market is booming. Property values are up more than $1 billion in 2025. That's according to the city's real estate assessor. WHRO's Nick McNamara covered the story.
Residential properties make up $720 million of the increase, on average rising more than 6% in 2024. Agricultural property values increased on average by almost the same rate. The increase is seen in median sale prices for single-family homes jumping from $382,000 to $410,000 over the past year. Rents also ticked up 4.7%, outpacing the 2.5% regional average. Commercial properties are up 7.8%, amounting to a $359 million rise. The increased assessments spell an additional $11.8 million in property tax revenue for the city. That's based on Suffolk's tax rate of $1.07 per $100 of assessed value. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Colleges and universities are dumping initiatives designed to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. WVTF's Michael Pope is back with this report.
The University of Virginia is ditching DEI. Same with George Mason University. And people who work in higher ed say they're expecting more to follow suit to keep federal dollars flowing. Rich Kelsey is a former assistant dean at George Mason School of Law.
There certainly is nothing wrong with trying to get people from every background into higher education. The problem is they've tried to do it irrespective of the talent, and that has become one of the issues in higher education.
That's a classic retort for anything that challenges the status quo, says Virginia Commonwealth University professor Jatia Wrighton.
Historically, different groups have been underrepresented or they've been purposely excluded from access. And so whatever you're going to call these programs, whether it be affirmative action, whether it be DEI, the underlying objective is to ensure that marginalized groups aren't being dismissed or passed over when they really should have equal access to these universities.
Last month, the new administration in Washington sent a letter to all educational institutions receiving federal funding with an ultimatum: end DEI programs or say goodbye to federal money. Michael Pope.
A judge says Virginia can stay out of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative while the state appeals an earlier decision that found it was illegal for Governor Youngkin to withdraw from the carbon market. WHRO's Catherine Hafner reports on what could come next.
Virginia lawmakers voted to join the carbon market known as RGGI in 2020. It aims to cut climate pollution by making power plants buy credits for their carbon emissions. Environmental groups sued when the state left the market under Youngkin. They successfully argued that only the General Assembly had that authority. Law professor Carl Tobias with the University of Richmond says the state's appeal will likely push court proceedings well into next year, but November's election could shake up state leadership before then.
I think there's going to be a political resolution before there's a judicial one.
He says the lawsuit could be moot if Democrats revive Virginia's RGGI regulation. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
The Trump administration's cuts in the federal workforce have been especially abrupt at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Until recently, the agency was adding thousands of employees to try to keep up with increased demand for veterans' medical care. Now it's firing thousands, including many of those who were newly hired. WHRO's Steve Walsh reported the story for the American Homefront Project.
Brian McLaughlin is a retired Army veteran who worked for almost a year at the VA hospital in Hampton. He was less than 2 months away from ending his required probation in a support position where he makes sure the healthcare staff has their necessary certifications.
So I came in Tuesday morning, my normal time. I went to log in to my system, and my system told me that I was unauthorized. So I called IT for support, and IT informed me that it's showing that you've been separated.
He later found out that a letter had been sent to his work email account after his shift ended the day before. McLaughlin says he was stunned, but he has since found out the process has been repeated throughout the VA system, which he fears will affect veterans' health care.
I mean, you're going to look at the health care for the veterans. It's going to truly suffer. And then you're going to have people that are staying there going to look to go somewhere else because they're going to know and feel that the unfairness could happen to them too.
But more cuts are on the way. The VA has so far fired 2,400 people, but VA Secretary Doug Collins announced the agency will cut back staffing to 2019 levels, eventually cutting at least another 70,000 jobs, or 15% of the total workforce.
Now, we regret anyone who loses their job. And it's extraordinarily difficult for me, especially as a VA leader, and your secretary to make these types of decisions. But the federal government does not exist to employ people. It exists to serve people. At the VA, we are focused on serving veterans better than ever before.
The firings are taking place as the number of VA patients is growing. It's jumped by 740,000 since Congress expanded VA care under the PACT Act in 2022. At the Hampton VA, 15,000 new veterans started using VA care. At a recent employee town hall, Hampton VA Acting Director Walt Dannenberg said he hasn't been told who will be cut next.
I will tell you that the VA has publicly stated that whatever the plan is that is currently under development, that he is committed to ensuring that whatever cuts are made do not impact those care and services that are offered to our veterans.
Unavoidably, many of the first cuts at the VA have been veterans themselves. Veterans make up roughly 30% of the VA workforce and the federal workforce as a whole. Virginia Democratic Senator Tim Kaine has sponsored a resolution condemning the cuts.
The single group that is being most disproportionately affected, more than any other group in this country, in these firings is veterans.
Less than a month ago, Kendra Eady received a promotion to become a purchasing agent at the Hampton VA. Similar to work she had performed on aircraft carriers over a nearly 20-year Navy career. The new job at the clinic in Chesapeake, Virginia, scheduled to open in April, was not exempt, and Edie was fired.
I just wanted to advance my career, that's all. And I actually got the chance to advance to a job I really, really like and get up in the morning excited to go do. That's where it gets snatched right up under me.
She plans to appeal her dismissal using an online process provided in her termination email. So far, she found the process to be so complex that she's reaching out for help from friends with more experience in federal personnel issues. Edie says she loved helping her fellow vets and would go back to the VA, even though more firings are on the horizon. In Norfolk, Virginia, I'm Steve Walsh.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
Suffolk plans to invest more than $534 million over the next 5 years to address a wide range of infrastructure and equipment needs. WHRO's Nick McNamara breaks it all down.
Just over $241 million of the more than $400 million going to general government projects are slated to come on the city's dime. The rest is expected from federal and state funding, cash proffers from private developers, and other sources.
Public schools and public safety is the majority of our budget. Public schools and public safety is also the majority of our CIP, which it should be.
That's Suffolk Mayor Mike Duman. The city's 5-year plan includes $96 million to replace the aging Elephants Fork Elementary School, $38 million in local funding for roadway upgrades, amounting to $190 million with state and federal grants, and $46 million for public safety upgrades, ranging from new fire engines and ambulances to new and renovated fire stations and medic bays. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Richmond resident Natasha Lindebeck and her 5-year-old German Shepherd, Kiva, recently became Master Hikers, a designation awarded by Virginia's Department of Conservation and Recreation. It means the pair visited 40 of the state's 43 parks together, including a local one that required just a little creativity. Vicki L. Friedman reports the story for WHRO.
The state doesn't track how many dogs are master hikers, but it's a small number and calls for some resourcefulness. Falls Cape State Park prohibits pets from accessing it at the Virginia Beach entrance because it passes through Back Bay National Wildlife Refuge. Lindebeck drove 3.5 hours to Corolla, North Carolina, and 10 miles on Corova Beach to access the park's southernmost entrance.
So I had to make sure to look at the tide charts, because the last thing I wanted was, to have my car wash away while it was parked.
Once the two checked off that visit, the rest was easy. Now Lindebeck looks forward to a new challenge for Kiva, completing a paddle-based activity in the state parks that offer it. Vicki O. Friedman, WHRO News.
The Department of Veterans Affairs is planning to cut as many as 80,000 employees, which it says will not affect health care or benefits. Still, VA staff and patients are concerned that a policy ending diversity programs will affect care for LGBTQ veterans. WHRO's Steve Walsh reports.
Mary Brinkmeyer put in her resignation after receiving emails from management in the wake of President Trump signing executive orders targeting DEI.
It was just a really upsetting and shocking change for me, from feeling as if the program was supported to suddenly having people being told they have to take every pride magnet out of their office. And it felt like that happened just overnight and without a lot of thought.
Until recently, the psychologist was the LGBTQ plus veteran care coordinator for the Hampton VA. A few days after the inauguration, employees at her VA were told to take down any outward signs referencing LGBTQ veterans, including flyers printed by the VA.
Less than 24 hours after everything had been taken out of the main hospital, I was speaking to a gay veteran who said, "Oh, I heard about how y'all took everything down. I guess that shows what they think of us."
Rainbow-colored pride lanyards which say the VA serves all who serve had been a strategy to make veterans feel safe. They were banned from the building, she says.
A lot of LGBTQ veterans don't feel safe coming to the VA because their experiences in the military were so unsafe.
Brinkmeyer says she decided to resign when she said she was told to stop attending employee orientation. A large part of her job had been training other providers in ways to ask the right questions. A transformation is underway at the VA, but it's unclear how large the change will be. VA Secretary Doug Collins announced the change to the VA's flag policy.
For all of us who served in uniform, that American flag is on our uniform. It's what unites us. So we've changed the policy. At the VA, you're only going to see the American flag and the POW flag. That's what's going to be flying in front of our facilities.
John Rogers with the Hampton VA says they are working to execute the executive order, and there will be no changes to services and benefits for veterans and VA beneficiaries until a formal order is issued. Banners and posters advertising the VA's outreach for LGBTQ plus veterans came down very quickly at the Hampton VA in Virginia. Amanda Volk is a patient at the Hampton VA. She served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell in 1995 and got out 18 months later after a sexual assault.
For those of us that lived through Don't Ask, Don't Tell, we were there. We saw it. We marched. We fought. We thought we had our rights. And now it's, we're back to the 80s with people being scared.
In New York State, one mental health practitioner says posters remain up at his VA, but he's still seen a chilling effect among veterans. NPR agreed to withhold his name as he fears retaliation.
I think, veterans are kind of hesitant, and some veterans I know have decided they're not willing to come in person. It's more on the veteran side of things that there's this uncertainty of kind of what care actually is going to look like.
Adding to the tension, in late January, a transgender veteran killed themselves in the parking garage of the Syracuse VA Medical Center, wrapped in the transgender flag. An indication, he says, that this shift has a high potential to impact patient care at the VA. For NPR News, I'm Steve Walsh.
You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from WHRO's Ryan Murphy, Catherine Hafner, Steve Walsh, Nick McNamara, Barry Graham, and Vicki L. Friedman. Also WVTF's Michael Pope. Thanks as always to Connor Worley, who produced today's broadcast. A reminder, you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed, and you can get your news updates at WHRO.org, the WHRO smartphone app, and the WHRO Reports podcast feed. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Stay safe. Be well.